to school. My parents moved in, God bless them. And so we spend most of our nights here in Wauwatosa as opposed to Madison, where the capital is. And last year, one Sunday after church, it was a late Packers kickoff. I think it was the 3:15 game as opposed to the early game. And so in between church and the Packers game, we decided to rake a couple leaves. And both Matt and Alex were out, me and one of their friends were with us as well. And I live on a busy street, and the left, the cars going by, pretty fast. And one of them honked, and I turned and looked, and the guy had rolled down the window, stuck his arm out, and he flipped me off. And Gavin, this friend of my son, said, "Mr. Walker, how do you put up with that?" And I said, "Well, it's America. People can do and say what they want." But I said, it's really kind of raw. It's one thing to do at the Capitol, one thing to protest the governor's residence, but somebody who's that crude in front of somebody's own home, I said, that's just wrong. I said, what I do is I usually pray for them so that I said, there's probably something more troubling in their life than just whether or not they agree with me or not. I said, besides that, if you stay positive, you stay upbeat, something good will come along.
Amen.
Well, I go back to raking a minute or two later. I hear a honking, and I think, oh, Lord. I think maybe I should have raked at night, right? Well, I turn around, and there's not one, but there's two cars, both in a row, both honking, both rolling down their windows, both have their arms out. And just when I think the same thing's going to happen again, both of them put their thumbs up.
Yeah.
And Gavin says to me, "Mr. Walker, did you know that was going to happen?" And I said, "No, but it proved my point." And the reason I tell you that is I said in so many ways, in so many instances, God has affirmed how abundant His grace is.
Amen.
And affirm that whether it's in politics or in business or in your own home life, that He calls us to follow Him, not the other way around. And if you stay true to that, no matter what you do in life, it's all going to work out.
Well, we've got your back at Faith and Freedom. We have prayer warriors, a prayer team that is supporting you, and all of our elected officials, actually. But I know your time is short here, and we have several people on the line that would like to ask you a question.
Sure, go ahead.
But I'm afraid for everybody that's listening that we only have time for a few calls. But stay with us to the end of tonight's program, because we'll have a way for you to get those questions asked. So, Governor Walker, our first question comes from one of your biggest fans. He also happens to be the youngest. Samuel is 10 years old, and he lives in Wisconsin. And so, Samuel, you go ahead and ask Governor your question.
Governor Walker, I think you're doing a great job.
Thank you, Samuel.
I'm 10 years old, and my parents run their own small business that I'd like to work with and run someday, but I don't know if I'd make enough money because there are so many taxes and costs. Do you think we will still be able to have our business when I'm older?
Well, first off, thanks for the call and thanks for the support. And, boy, thank you for at 10 years old. I'm amazed. My boys are 16 and 17, and my nieces are 8 and 5, so I know right about smack dab in the middle of that age, and you're pretty sharp just for being on this call and asking that great question. The answer is yes. As long as I'm governor, we're going to make sure that we put more resources, more of the dollars that your mom and dad and you someday will be working hard for back in your own hands so that you can run your own business and so that you can afford to. That's why we were so pleased that property taxes went down this year for the first time in 12 years. It's why we were so pleased we were able to pass other reforms that lowered the tax burden for small businesses in our state, and why we're going to do even more to do that in the future, because unlike, unfortunately, a lot of people in Washington, D.C. these days, I understand that if you want the economy to grow, the best way to make that happen is to put more people in the hands of people like your mom and dad and like you someday that put people to work, because it's the people that make jobs, not the government. We appreciate it.
That's right on. Isn't that touching, Governor Walker, to hear someone that age actually share his concerns for what he's saying? And I think that we're seeing that throughout the state and certainly across the nation, that it's the younger generations that are starting to realize that it's their futures that are at stake.
Absolutely.
So we're gonna keep moving on. We've got two more people on the line for you. Actually, we've got thousands, but we're not going to be able to get to all of them. So our next question is from Grant from Wisconsin again. Go ahead, Grant.
Hi, Grant.
Hello. Oh, I'm sorry. Is it Helene or is it Grant?
They're both being
Hello,
polite.
Helene.
I can talk. I'm Helene. I've got a question here.
Hi, Helene.
Are you ready for me?
Yeah, go ahead.
We're ready.
Please.
Go ahead.
Okay. Good evening, Governor Walker.
Good to talk to you.
Well, it's good to talk to you. You know, I'm from Minnesota, and I sure wish you were our governor.
Oh, thank you.
And my question is this: how will your reforms help other states such as Minnesota, and what can we do to help you during this ridiculous recall?
Well, I think when we prevail, and God willing, and with the support of voters in the state of Wisconsin, we'll win. I think that in particular will have an impact, because I think it'll tell elected officials in other state houses, and certainly in Washington, D.C., where people like my friend Paul Ryan's trying to do equally courageous things. Paul and I grew up down the road from each other, and when I was growing up in a small town, Janesville is about twice the size of our town, and have known him for many years and does a fabulous job. But whether it's in Washington, whether it's in St. Paul, or whether it's in Madison, my capital, I think for us to win this election, excuse me, it really sets a strong message that voters want us to make those tough decisions, that they want us to put the power back in the hands of the hardworking taxpayers and not in the hands of a handful of special interests. And so I think that'll go a long way. And in terms of what can be people to do to help, well, first off, pray for us. Pray for me and my family, and pray for us at all times if you wish. That would be great, but particularly for the next 4.5 weeks. And then the three things I think specific, I call it the 3 M's: message, manpower, and money. All those or any of those or a combination of those will help out. The message is the most powerful. We get the truth out. Anybody who lives in Wisconsin, does business in Wisconsin, has friends in Wisconsin, has a relative somewhere down the line in Wisconsin, anyone who can get the truth out, the facts out about how the reforms are working. We've saved $1 billion. We've lowered property taxes. We see our economy taking off again. The last thing we want to do is go backwards. The more people can help us get that message out, the better. On the manpower standpoint, this election, literally today a poll came out, it is about as close to 50-50 as you can get. It's about as evenly split. And so people helping us identify voters, whether you do it through the Faith and Family Coalition or somebody helps us at one of our campaign offices, all that makes a tremendous difference, the phone banks and things of that nature. And so every bit you can do to help us identify voters and make sure they get out to the polls. And then the last part is on the money. I just had a report on Monday. In our case, 76.4% of all our donations are people who gave us $50 or less. So certainly Faith and Freedom Coalition is a key component of that. Folks who are interested in the details of our campaign at scottwalker.org, and all of that will go a long way. So thanks so much for the call.
Excellent. Well, unfortunately, we only have time for one last question, and I can hear a collective groan go across the state. Again, Governor Walker, we have over 10,000 people with us tonight.
That's great.
And I like to tell everybody that you're loved in this state.